The scent of furniture polish clung to my skin like a second layer as I rubbed circles into the mahogany dining table. 30 feet long, this table had witnessed more criminal dealings than a courthouse, though I pretended not to know that. The mansion was quiet this afternoon. Too quiet, with only the occasional footsteps of security personnel patrolling the grounds, disturbing the silence. Outside, rain tapped against the floor-to-ceiling windows, blurring the view of the immaculate gardens that surrounded Victor Castellanos' estate. I wasn't supposed to be in this room. The main dining hall was typically cleaned by Mrs. Petrovich, but she had called in sick, and I had been reassigned. 3 months working as a maid in this fortress of a home, and there were still rooms I'd never entered. The thought made me shiver despite the warmth of the day. You missed a spot. The voice froze me in place, low, controlled, with that slight Italian accent that became more pronounced when he was angry. I hadn't heard him enter. I never did. Victor moved like a predator, silent and deliberate. "I'm sorry, Mr. Castellano," I said, not turning around. "I'll get it right away." I felt him approach, rather than heard him. The air in the room seemed to shift, molecules rearranging themselves to accommodate his presence. My heart hammered against my ribs as he stopped directly behind me. "Look at me when I speak to you, Olivia." Slowly, I turned. At 34, Victor Castellano commanded the largest criminal enterprise in the city, yet looked more like he belonged on the cover of a business magazine. Dark hair cut precisely, stubble that never quite became a beard framing a jaw that could have been carved from marble, but it was his eyes that held me captive. Dark as midnight, and just as full of secrets. "This is your first time cleaning this room." Not a question. "Yes, sir." "Mrs. Petrovich is ill." He studied me, gaze traveling from my face down to my hands, still clutching the polishing cloth. I fought the urge to hide them. 3 months of scrubbing and polishing had left them red and rough, nothing like they'd been when I worked at the hospital. "You've done well," he said finally. "Better than the old woman." A compliment from Victor Castellano was as rare as snow in July. I lowered my gaze, unsure how to respond. "Thank you, sir." He moved past me to the head of the table, running one finger along the polished surface. "Join me for a moment." Again, not a question. I glanced at the clock on the wall. I still had 3 more rooms to clean before my shift ended. "Sir, Sit, Olivia." I sat in the chair he pulled out, 3 spaces away from the head of the table. Close enough to hear him speak without raising his voice, but far enough to maintain the distance between employer and employee. Or so I thought. Victor slid into the chair directly beside me instead, the scent of his cologne, something expensive and woody, enveloping me. Up close, I could see the faint scar that ran through his right eyebrow, and the slight shadow of stubble along his jaw. "How long have you been with us now?" he asked, though I knew he was well aware of the answer. 3 months, sir. And before that, you were a nurse at St. Mary's Hospital." My stomach tightened. I'd never mentioned my previous job to him. "Yes, sir. Pediatric unit, specialized in neonatal care." His eyes never left my face. Quite a change, wouldn't you say? The air in my lungs seemed to evaporate. How much did he know? Did he know about Ryan? About what had happened? About why I needed to disappear into a job where no one would think to look for me? "I needed a change," I said carefully. Victor leaned back in his chair, the picture of relaxed authority. But I knew better. Nothing about this man was ever truly relaxed. "A nurse with your qualifications could find work anywhere, yet you chose to clean my home for minimum wage." I gripped my hands together beneath the table. "The pay is fair, Mr. Castellano." A smile ghosted across his lips. "Fair, perhaps, but not what you're worth." Before I could respond, the double doors to the dining room swung open. Angelo, Victor's head of security, strode in. His gaze landed on me before shifting to his boss, confusion evident. "Sir, Marconi is here." Victor's expression didn't change, but something in the air did. The temperature seemed to drop several degrees. "I told you I wasn't to be disturbed," he said, his voice eerily quiet. Angelo's face paled. "He insisted, boss. Says it's about the shipment from Calabria." Victor sighed, a sound so normal it seemed out of place coming from him. He stood, buttoning his suit jacket in one fluid motion. "Wait here, Olivia. We're not finished." I watched him leave, Angelo following a half-step behind. The door closed with a soft click that echoed in the vast room. I should have returned to work. Should have finished polishing the table and moved on to the library as scheduled. Instead, I remained seated, heart pounding. Victor Castellano had never singled me out before, had barely acknowledged my existence beyond the occasional nod when passing in the hallway. Now, suddenly, he knew my employment history, my specialization. 5 minutes passed, then 10. When it became clear he wouldn't return quickly, I stood and gathered my cleaning supplies. Whatever game he was playing, I couldn't afford to be a part of it. Not with Ryan depending on me, not with everything I'd sacrificed to keep us safe. I was halfway to the door when it swung open again. Not Victor, but Marconi, a man I'd seen visiting the mansion several times, always with an entourage of hard-faced men who seemed more comfortable with guns than conversation. Well, well, he said, eyeing me with unconcealed interest. Victor's hiding the pretty ones in the dining room now? I lowered my gaze, trying to sidestep him. Excuse me, sir. I need to finish my work. He moved into my path, close enough that I could smell whiskey on his breath. What's your name, Bella? Please, I need to go, I said, clutching my cleaning caddy like a shield. Marconi chuckled, reaching out to brush a strand of hair from my face. No need to rush. Victor and Angelo will be arguing for at least another 10 minutes, plenty of time for us to get acquainted. I stepped back, but the massive dining table blocked my retreat. Mr. Castellano asked me to wait for him. Did he now? Marconi's eyes narrowed, something calculating replacing the lecherous look. Interesting. The boss doesn't usually concern himself with the help. My skin crawled as his gaze traveled down my body. I wore the standard uniform, black pants and a simple white button-up shirt, nothing revealing or provocative. Yet I felt naked under his scrutiny. Just passing through, Marconi murmured, more to himself than to me. He reached out again, this time gripping my arm. But perhaps I should find out what makes you special enough for Victor's attention. His fingers dug painfully into my flesh as he pulled me closer. I dropped my cleaning caddy, the clatter of bottles hitting the hardwood floor echoing in the vast room. Let go of me, I hissed, trying to wrench my arm free. Marconi's grip only tightened. Feisty. I like that. I believe she asked you to let go. Victor's voice, cold as ice, cut through the room. Marconi released me instantly, stepping back as Victor entered, followed by Angelo and another security guard whose name I didn't know. Boss, I was just... Who touched you? Victor asked, ignoring Marconi completely as he approached me, his eyes locked on the red marks forming on my arm. I swallowed hard, suddenly more afraid of the quiet rage in Victor's eyes than I had been of Marconi's unwanted advances. It's nothing, sir. Who touched you? Each word was a blade, sharp and precise. Before I could answer, Victor's hand shot out, gripping my wrist gently but firmly. He turned my arm, examining the marks, his face a mask of controlled fury. It was a misunderstanding, I said quickly, aware of how rapidly the situation was deteriorating. I'm fine, really. Victor's gaze never left my arm as he spoke. Angelo, escort Mr. Marconi to his car. Ensure he understands he's no longer welcome in my home. Marconi's face flushed with anger. Victor, over a maid, be reasonable. The Calabria shipment will proceed without your involvement, Victor finished, finally looking up. The expression on his face must have been terrifying, because Marconi actually took a step back. Consider our arrangement terminated. Angelo moved forward, hand resting ominously on the bulge beneath his jacket. Marconi looked from him to Victor, then back to me, understanding dawning in his eyes. She's not just a maid, he said slowly. Is she, Victor? The silence that followed was deafening. Victor's hand remained on my wrist, his thumb now making small, almost unconscious circles against my pulse point. Get him out, Victor said finally, his voice so quiet I barely heard it. As Angelo escorted a protesting Marconi from the room, Victor turned to me, his expression unreadable. Are you hurt? I shook my head, too stunned to speak. What had just happened? What had Marconi meant? Victor released my wrist, then knelt to gather the cleaning supplies I'd dropped. The sight was so incongruous, the most feared man in the city on his knees, picking up bottles of furniture polish, that for a moment I could only stare. Sir, you don't have to. This evening, he interrupted, standing and handing me the caddy. You'll join me for dinner. Again, not a question. I can't, I stammered. My shift ends at 6 and I need to. Your shift ends when I say it does, Victor said, his tone gentle despite the finality of the words. Dinner, 8 o'clock, wear something nice. He paused, then added, please. That, please, so unexpected, so at odds with everything else, rendered me speechless. I nodded, not trusting my voice. Victor's lips curved into a slight smile. Good. Now, I believe you have the library to clean next. Just like that, I was dismissed. I hurried from the room, mind racing with questions. How did he know my schedule? Why had he reacted so violently to Marconi touching me? And most importantly, what did he want from me? By the time I finished the library and the guest bathroom, rumors had already spread through the mansion like wildfire. The other staff avoided my eyes, conversation stopping abruptly when I entered a room. Only Maria, the head housekeeper, dared approach me as I gathered my belongings at the end of my shift. Olivia, she said quietly, her weathered face lined with concern. Be careful, yes. Mr. Castellano, he is not a man to be trifled with. It's just dinner, I said, not believing my own words. Maria's expression told me she didn't believe them either. Nothing is just anything with that man. 3 years I've worked here. Never once has he invited staff to dine with him. Then why me? The question escaped before I could stop it. Maria shook her head. I don't know, child. But by tomorrow the whole city will know you're not just his maid anymore. As I left the mansion, I felt the weight of dozens of eyes watching from windows, security cameras, and the dark SUVs that lined the circular driveway. Whatever game Victor Castellano was playing, I was now a central piece on his board. And I had no idea what the rules were. I lived in a small apartment 20 minutes from Victor's estate, in a neighborhood that wasn't dangerous enough to be truly unsafe, but wasn't nice enough to attract attention. Anonymity had been my goal when I'd moved here with Ryan 3 months ago, paying 6 months' rent in advance with the last of my savings. The apartment was quiet when I arrived home. Mrs. Patel from next door sat at my kitchen table, working on a crossword puzzle. She looked up when I entered, relief washing over her face. You're late today, she said, checking her watch. I was starting to worry. I'm sorry, I said, hanging my coat on the hook by the door. There was a situation at work. Mrs. Patel nodded, gathering her things. She watched Ryan for me while I worked. A blessing I couldn't afford but desperately needed. Ryan's been fed and bathed. He fell asleep about 20 minutes ago. I followed her gaze to the small crib in the corner of the living room, where my 10-month-old son slept peacefully, one tiny fist curled near his face. Something in my chest twisted painfully at the sight of him. Thank you, I whispered, walking Mrs. Patel to the door. I pressed $40 into her hand, more than I could spare, but less than she deserved. Too much, she protested, trying to hand some back. Please, I insisted. You're saving my life. After she left, I moved to the crib and watched Ryan sleep, his little chest rising and falling with each breath. Everything I'd done, leaving my job, my friends, my entire life behind, had been for him, to protect him from a father who saw him as property, not a person. A father whose family name carried enough weight to potentially win custody, despite a history of violence. I'd been naive, thinking Jack's family money and connections would provide security. By the time I realized the price of that security, my freedom, my safety, eventually Ryan's future, it was too late. I was pregnant and trapped in a relationship that had turned from charming to controlling to dangerous. The night Jack had pushed me down the stairs, I'd made my decision. 3 cracked ribs and a sprained wrist later, I'd filed a restraining order and disappeared, giving birth to Ryan in a hospital 3 states away, before eventually settling here, where no one knew us. Or so I'd thought. The memory of Victor's words echoed in my head. Pediatric unit, specialized in neonatal care. How had he known? Had Jack found me? Was Victor connected to him somehow? My heart raced as I glanced at the clock. 7:15. I had 45 minutes to get ready for a dinner I didn't want to attend with a man who terrified me. But refusing wasn't an option. Not if I wanted to keep this job, this apartment, this fragile safety I'd constructed. I called Mrs. Patel again, hating myself for asking more of her, but seeing no alternative. She agreed to return immediately, waving away my apologies. "Hot date?" she asked with a wink, as she settled back at my kitchen table. "Work thing," I muttered, disappearing into the bathroom. I stared at my reflection, hardly recognizing the woman who looked back at me. 3 months of stress and too little sleep had left shadows beneath my eyes. My blonde hair, once my pride, now hung limp around my face, desperately in need of a trim. I looked defeated. The thought angered me. I wasn't defeated. I'd survived Jack. I'd escaped. I'd built a new life for Ryan and me. I wasn't going to let Victor Castellano intimidate me, even if he was the most dangerous man in the city. I showered quickly, blow-dried my hair, and applied makeup for the first time in months. The only nice outfit I owned was a simple black dress I'd worn to job interviews before landing the position at Victor's estate. It wasn't particularly fashionable or revealing, but it was clean and fit reasonably well despite the weight I'd lost since Ryan's birth. Mrs. Patel whistled when I emerged. "Not a work thing," she declared, eyes twinkling. "A man thing." "Definitely not," I said, reaching for my coat. "Don't wait up. I don't know how long this will take." "Take all night if you need," she said, settling in with her crossword. "Ryan and I are old friends now." Outside, I hesitated, unsure how I was supposed to get to Victor's estate. I'd assumed I would take the bus, but that would mean arriving late, something I sensed would not be tolerated. As I contemplated calling a taxi I couldn't afford, a black SUV with tinted windows pulled up to the curb. The driver's window lowered, revealing Angelo's impassive face. "Ms. Bennett, Mr. Castellano sent me to collect you." Of course he had. Of course he knew where I lived. I wondered what else he knew. The drive back to the estate was silent. Angelo made no attempt at conversation, and I was too nervous to initiate any. Instead, I watched the city pass by, the neighborhoods gradually becoming more affluent as we approached Victor's domain. Rather than the main entrance I usually used for work, Angelo drove around to a private entrance I'd never seen before. He escorted me through a door and down a hallway lined with paintings that probably cost more than I'd earn in a decade. "Mr. Castellano is waiting in the private dining room," Angelo said, stopping before a set of ornate double doors. He knocked once, then opened them without waiting for a response. The room beyond was smaller than the main dining hall, but no less impressive. A table set for two occupied the center, illuminated by a crystal chandelier that cast warm light over the polished wood and gleaming silverware. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a view of the garden, now lit by discreet landscape lighting that made the rain-slicked plants glisten like gems. Victor stood as I entered, his eyes traveling slowly from my face to my shoes and back again. Unlike our earlier encounter, he wasn't wearing a suit, but dark trousers and a crisp white shirt, open at the collar. The more casual attire should have made him seem more approachable. It didn't. "Olivia," he said, my name sounding different in his accent. "Right on time." Angelo disappeared, closing the doors behind him. "I didn't have much choice," I said, before I could stop myself. A smile touched Victor's lips. "No, I suppose you didn't." He gestured to the chair across from his. "Please sit." I did, uncomfortably aware of how different this was from our earlier interaction at the dining table. Then, I'd been in uniform, clearly an employee. Now, despite my modest dress, the lines were blurred. "Wine?" he asked, reaching for a bottle already open on the table. "No, thank you. Alcohol would only dull my senses, something I couldn't afford right now." Victor raised an eyebrow but didn't press. He poured himself a glass, the ruby liquid catching the light. "You're wondering why you're here, among other things. Ask, then." I hesitated, surprised by the invitation. "How did you know where I worked before? About my specialization?" Victor took a sip of his wine, watching me over the rim of his glass. "I know everything about the people who enter my home, Olivia. It's a matter of security. You didn't know about the others when they started," I countered. "Maria told me. Maria should mind her own business." The words were cold, but his tone remained conversational. "You're right, though. I typically leave the vetting of household staff to my head of security. Yours was of particular interest. A chill ran through me. Why? Before he could answer, the doors opened again, and 2 servers entered carrying trays. They set plates before us, some kind of delicate fish dish that smelled divine, and retreated without a word. Victor gestured for me to eat. I'm told you skip lunch most days. Another detail he shouldn't know. I picked up my fork, more to buy time than from any appetite. You haven't answered my question. No, I haven't. He cut into his fish with surgical precision. Tell me about your son. The fork clattered from my fingers onto the fine china plate. How do you... Ryan, isn't it? 10 months old now. Fear, cold and sharp, sliced through me. I pushed back my chair, ready to flee. If Jack sent you... Jack didn't send me. Victor's
Jack
voice
Thornton
cut through
doesn't
my
know where
panic.
you are.
No one from your past does. I froze, half standing. Then how do you know? Sit, Olivia. Please. I'm not here to hurt you or your son. Slowly, I sank back into my chair, heart hammering so hard I could feel it in my throat. What do you want from me? Victor set down his utensils, giving me his full attention. 3 months ago, a woman with a newborn appears in my city. She has nursing credentials, experience in one of the best neonatal units in the country, yet she applies for a position as a maid in my home, a position that pays barely enough to cover rent and childcare. He leaned forward, eyes intent on mine. This woman has a bruised face she tries to hide with makeup. She gives a false name on her application but uses legitimate identification documents. She lives in an apartment rented under yet another name. I swallowed hard. I'd used my middle name, Bennett, on my job application, but my driver's license still showed my legal name, Olivia Collins. The apartment was rented under Lisa Warren, a complete fabrication. You were running from something, Victor continued. Someone. A man who hurt you. A man powerful enough that you felt the need to create a new identity. His jaw tightened. I recognized the signs. Why would you care? I whispered. Something dark passed over his face. My mother had similar signs when I was a child. No one helped her. The confession startled me. Victor Castellano, sharing something personal. It didn't fit the image of the cold, calculating crime boss I'd built in my head. I still don't understand, I said after a moment. Why hire me? Why this dinner? I hired you because you were qualified and desperate. A combination that usually ensures loyalty and discretion. He picked up his wine again. As for dinner, Marconi's actions today accelerated a timeline I hadn't planned to initiate yet. Timeline? I echoed, feeling increasingly lost. Your ex-husband's family has been making inquiries in the city, discreet ones, but inquiries nonetheless. Ice flooded my veins. He's found me? Not yet, but he will eventually. The Thorntons have resources, connections. How do you know about Jack's family? A smile with no humor. The Castellanos have been dealing with families like the Thorntons for generations, Olivia. Old money, political connections, veneer of respectability hiding rot beneath. I know exactly who they are. My mind raced. If Jack was looking in this city, it was only a matter of time before he found us. I needed to run again, start over somewhere new. But with what money? My savings were gone. What does this have to do with Marconi? I asked, trying to make sense of the pieces Victor was laying out. Marconi saw me take an interest in you. By now, he's told half the city that Victor Castellanos maid is something more to him. Victor's eyes held mine. We're going to let them believe it. I don't understand. It's simple. If you're under my protection, the Thorntons won't touch you. They wouldn't dare. I stared at him, finally understanding. You want to pretend that we're involved? Precisely. Why would you do that for me? For a maid you barely know? Victor was silent for a long moment, swirling the wine in his glass. Let's just say I have my reasons. That's not good enough, I said, surprising myself with my boldness. Not if you want me to pretend to be your... whatever it is you're suggesting. His eyes flashed with something that might have been approval. Fair enough. The Thorntons have been moving into territory that concerns me. Jack's father has political aspirations that could complicate my business interests. Business interests. A polite euphemism for criminal empire. You want to use me to get at Jack's family, I said flatly. I prefer to think of it as a mutually beneficial arrangement. Victor leaned back in his chair. You get protection for yourself and your son. I get leverage against a family that's becoming problematic. And if I refuse? You won't. The certainty in his voice angered me. You don't know that. I do, he said simply. Because you're a mother who would do anything to protect her child, even align yourself with someone like me. The truth of his words stung. I would do anything to keep Ryan safe. Hadn't I already proven that by leaving everything behind? What exactly would this arrangement entail? I asked, hating how calculating I sounded. Like I was negotiating a business deal instead of my life. You would move into the east wing of the mansion. Private quarters, separate from mine. You would no longer work as a maid. To the outside world, you would be my companion. Your mistress, you mean? Victor's expression didn't change. Call it what you like. You would accompany me to certain events. Be seen with me in public occasionally. Nothing more would be required. And Ryan? Would live here as well, of course. I'll arrange for a qualified nanny. My laugh was bitter. You want me to let my son live in a house full of criminals, as opposed to an apartment where anyone could break in? Victor's voice hardened. This estate has security measures that would make the Pentagon envious. No one enters without my knowledge. No one. He had a point. But still. And what happens when you're done with this charade? When the Thorntons are no longer a problem? Then you'll be free to go, with enough money to start over properly. Somewhere the Thorntons will never find you. It was tempting. So tempting that I hated myself for considering it. Protection for Ryan, security I couldn't provide on my own. But at what cost? I need time to think, I said finally. Victor nodded, as if he'd expected this response. Of course, but not too much time, Olivia. The Thorntons are getting closer. As if to emphasize his point, my phone buzzed in my purse. I pulled it out, frowning at the unfamiliar number. May I? Victor asked, hand extended. Reluctantly, I passed him the phone. He read the text message, his expression darkening. What is it? I asked, fear clawing at my throat. Victor handed the phone back, his eyes meeting mine. It seems we've run out of time. Jack's father will be attending a charity gala at the Westmore Hotel tomorrow night. The same gala I'm expected to attend. I looked down at the message. Olivia, it's been too long. I hear you're in the city. We should catch up. I'll be at the Westmore tomorrow night. For Ryan's sake, I hope to see you there. Jack. How did he get this number? I whispered, panic rising. How does he know? The question isn't how, Victor said, standing and coming around to my side of the table. It's what happens next. He knelt beside my chair, bringing his face level with mine. Up close, I could see flecks of amber in his dark eyes. A small scar near his temple I hadn't noticed before. I can protect you, Olivia, you and your son. But only if you let me. In that moment, with Jack's threat hanging over me and my options disappearing like smoke, I made my decision. Perhaps it was desperation. Perhaps it was the unexpected gentleness in Victor's voice. Perhaps it was simply that, of all the dangerous men in my life, he was the only one who had offered protection instead of pain. All right, I said, my voice barely audible. I'll do it. Something like satisfaction flickered across Victor's face. He stood, offering his hand. Then let's get your son. Tonight, you both stay here. As he led me from the dining room, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd just made a deal with the devil. The question was, would this devil prove better or worse than the one I was already running from? By morning, as Victor had predicted, the whole city would know I wasn't just his maid. What they wouldn't know was that I wasn't truly his anything, just a pawn in a game between powerful men, fighting to protect the only thing that mattered, my son. Morning sunlight streamed through windows larger than my entire apartment bathroom, painting golden rectangles across a bed that could have comfortably fit 4 people. I blinked, momentarily disoriented by the unfamiliar surroundings, the silk sheets, the plush carpet, the faint scent of jasmine from somewhere unseen. Then I heard Ryan's babbling from the adjoining room, and reality crashed back. I'd slept in Victor Castellano's mansion, in the East Wing, as promised. A suite of rooms that would have made a five-star hotel envious. Ryan had his own nursery, hastily but expertly prepared during our midnight move from the apartment. Someone had even brought his crib, his few toys, the blue blanket he couldn't sleep without. I slipped from the bed, my bare feet sinking into carpet thick enough to swallow them. The nightgown I wore wasn't mine. Silk, like the sheets, in a deep emerald that complemented my eyes. My clothes from the previous night had disappeared while I bathed Ryan, replaced by a closet full of garments I'd never seen before, all exactly my size. I found Ryan standing in his crib, bouncing excitedly and reaching for me. His face lit up when he saw me, a toothless smile that never failed to make my heart ache with love. "Good morning, little man," I whispered, lifting him into my arms. He smelled of baby powder and innocence, his tiny hands immediately going to my hair. "What do you think of our new accommodations, Ryan's only answer was a happy gurgle as he tugged at a strand of my hair. A soft knock at the door made me tense. "Yes?" I called, clutching Ryan closer. The door opened to reveal a young woman with auburn hair pulled into a neat bun. She wore a simple black dress with a white collar. Not quite a uniform, but professional nonetheless. "Ms. Bennett. I'm Sophie, the nanny Mr. Castellano hired for Ryan." Her smile was warm, her British accent unexpected. "I've brought breakfast for you both." Behind her, a man in house staff attire wheeled in a cart, laden with covered dishes, a small high chair, and what appeared to be freshly squeezed orange juice. He set it up near the window, nodded politely, and departed without a word. Sophie approached slowly, her eyes on Ryan. "He's beautiful," she said. 10 months old, correct?" I nodded, still wary. "You have experience with infants?" 7 years as a nanny, 3 of those with newborns. She reached into a pocket and produced a folded paper, which she handed to me. "My credentials and references. Mr. Castellano said you'd want to verify them." Of course he had. Victor Castellano, anticipating my concerns before I voiced them. It was both thoughtful and unnerving. "Thank you," I said, tucking the paper into the pocket of my nightgown. "I'd like some time alone with Ryan first, if that's all right." "Of course." Sophie moved to the door. "I'll return in an hour. Mr. Castellano asked me to remind you that the stylist will arrive at 11 to prepare for tonight's event. The gala. Jack." The events of the previous night rushed back, a wave of anxiety nearly knocking me off my feet. "Is he here?" I asked before Sophie could leave. "Mr. Castellano?" Sophie shook her head. "He left early this morning. Business, I believe. He said to tell you he'll return by 6 to escort you to the gala." After she left, I settled Ryan in the high chair and uncovered the breakfast dishes. Eggs Benedict, fresh fruit, pastries still warm from the oven. Nothing like the hurried toast or instant oatmeal that usually constituted our morning meal. "Well, Ryan," I said, cutting a small piece of banana for him, "I guess we're not in Kansas anymore." The morning passed in a blur of activity. Sophie returned, proving herself both competent and kind, answering my questions about the household while entertaining Ryan. I reviewed her references, impeccable, as expected, and reluctantly left my son in her care while I met with the stylist, a sharp-eyed woman named Valentina, who spoke mostly Italian and seemed personally offended by my split ends. 3 hours later, I hardly recognized myself in the mirror. Valentina had trimmed my hair, given it some kind of treatment that made it shine like polished gold, and styled it in loose waves that framed my face. My nails, previously bitten and uneven, were now perfectly manicured ovals painted a subtle rose. A makeup artist followed, working with a light hand that enhanced rather than concealed. By the time they were done, I looked rested, healthy, like the woman I'd been before Jack, before the fear and exhaustion had etched themselves into my face. "Mr. Castellano has selected your gown for this evening," Valentina informed me as she packed her supplies. "It will be delivered shortly. The car will be ready at 7. I nodded, too overwhelmed to argue about Victor choosing my clothes. One battle at a time. When the gown arrived, carried by 2 assistants as if it were made of spun glass, I understood Valentina's reverence. The dress was midnight blue, a color so deep it appeared almost black until the light caught it. Simple in silhouette, fitted bodice, flowing skirt. but the fabric moved like water, catching and reflecting light in a way that made it seem alive. It fit perfectly, of course, as did the delicate silver heels that accompanied it, the sapphire and diamond earrings, the bracelet that clasped around my wrist with a soft click. Standing before the full-length mirror, I barely recognized the woman who looked back at me. She was elegant, poised, the kind of woman who belonged on the arm of a man like Victor Castellano. A sudden hollow ache opened in my chest. This wasn't me. This was a costume, a role I was playing to protect my son. The real Olivia Bennett, or Collins, or Warren, whatever name I was using now, was a mother, a nurse. Not this polished creation designed to convince the world I was Victor's chosen companion. "You look beautiful." I turned to find Victor standing in the doorway of my bedroom, one shoulder leaning against the frame. He wore a tuxedo that fit him like a second skin, his dark hair combed back, stubble groomed to perfect precision. A small blue flower adorned his lapel, the exact shade of my dress. "Thank you," I said, suddenly self-conscious under his scrutiny. "For the dress. For everything." Victor entered the room, closing the door behind him. "How's Ryan?" The question surprised me. "He's fine." "Sophie seems excellent." "She is. I had her thoroughly vetted." He moved closer, his gaze traveling over me in a way that wasn't exactly inappropriate, but wasn't entirely professional either. "The security team has been doubled. No one enters or leaves without my explicit approval." "What about Jack?" I asked, the name still difficult to say aloud. "What if he tries to—" "He won't," Victor interrupted, his voice hardening. "Not after tonight." "What does that mean? What are you planning?" Victor reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet box. "First, this." He opened it to reveal a ring, a large emerald surrounded by diamonds, set in what appeared to be platinum. It was ostentatious, eye-catching. Exactly the sort of thing a man like Victor would give a woman he wanted to show off. "I don't understand," I said, staring at the ring. "For tonight, you need to be more than just a woman I'm seen with." Victor removed the ring from its box. "You need to be someone untouchable." He took my left hand, sliding the ring onto my fourth finger. It was heavier than it looked, the emerald catching the light like a small green sun. "Your fiancé?" I guessed, staring at the ring. "My fiancé," Victor confirmed. "It's the safest position for you. No one touches what's mine, Olivia. No one." There was a possessiveness in his tone that should have frightened me. Instead, it sent an unexpected shiver down my spine. Not fear, but something more complex. "Jack won't believe it," I said. "He knows me. He'll know this isn't real." "It doesn't matter what he believes." Victor's thumb traced small circles on the inside of my wrist just above the bracelet. "It matters what he can prove, and he can prove nothing." I pulled my hand away, needing distance. "This is moving too fast. Yesterday I was your maid. Today I'm wearing a fortune in jewelry, pretending to be engaged to you." "Would you prefer I gave you less protection?" Victor asked, his voice mild but his eyes sharp. "No, of course not. It's just—" I gestured helplessly at the opulent room, the expensive dress, the ring that probably cost more than I'd earned in my entire life. "This isn't me." Victor stepped closer, close enough that I could smell his cologne. "For tonight, it is." "Can you handle that, Olivia?" There was a challenge in his voice, as if he were testing me. I lifted my chin, meeting his gaze directly. "I can handle anything for Ryan's safety." Something like approval flickered in Victor's eyes. "Good. Then there's one more thing you should know before we leave." "What?" "In public, I'm going to touch you." His voice dropped lower, the words almost intimate. "Nothing inappropriate, but enough to convince everyone that you're mine. That means my hand at your back, perhaps on your waist. I might kiss your cheek, whisper in your ear." My heart rate quickened. "I understand." "Do you?" Victor's gaze was intense, because for this to work, you can't flinch. Can't look uncomfortable or surprised. You need to respond as if we've been lovers for months. Lovers. The word hung between us, charged with implications I wasn't ready to examine. "I said I understand," I repeated, more firmly this time. "I can play a part, Victor, I've been playing parts my entire life. First the dutiful daughter, then the perfect girlfriend, then the submissive wife. Pretending to be Victor Castellanos' fiancée was just one more role, albeit the strangest one yet. Victor nodded, apparently satisfied. The car is waiting. He offered his arm and I took it, the gesture feeling oddly formal given the intimate conversation we'd just had. As we descended the grand staircase, staff members paused in their duties to watch us pass. Their expressions ranged from curiosity to outright shock. The maid transformed into Cinderella, on the arm of the most dangerous prince in the city. Outside, Angelo held the door of a sleek black Bentley. As Victor helped me into the back seat, his hand lingered on mine a moment longer than necessary, the first act in our performance. The drive to the Westmore Hotel was silent. I stared out the window, watching the city lights blur past, trying to calm my racing heart. In less than an hour, I would face Jack for the first time since I'd fled with our newborn son. The thought made me nauseous with anxiety. "You're trembling," Victor observed quietly. I looked down at my hands, surprised to find them shaking. "I'm sorry, don't apologize." Victor reached across the seat, taking my hand in his. His palm was warm, the touch unexpectedly grounding. Fear is natural. Acting despite fear, that's courage. Is that what this is? Courage? I laughed bitterly. It feels more like desperation. Sometimes they're the same thing. The Bentley pulled up to the hotel entrance, where a red carpet stretched between velvet ropes. Photographers lined the walkway, flashes popping as elegantly dressed guests made their way inside. Angelo opened the door on Victor's side first. As he emerged, whispers rippled through the crowd. Victor Castellano rarely attended public events, and when he did, he came alone. Tonight would change that narrative. My door opened, and Victor extended his hand to help me out. The moment I emerged, flashbulbs exploded like miniature stars. I blinked, momentarily blinded by the light. Victor's arm slid around my waist, steady and possessive. "Smile," he murmured near my ear. "You're the envy of every woman here." I forced a smile, leaning into him as if it were the most natural thing in the world. We moved down the red carpet, Victor nodding occasionally to people he recognized but never stopping to chat. The message was clear. Victor Castellano was above the fray, untouchable. Inside, the ballroom was a glittering spectacle of wealth and privilege. Crystal chandeliers cast rainbow prisms across walls draped in silk. A string quartet played in one corner, their music nearly drowned out by the hum of conversation. Waiters in white gloves circulated with champagne and hors d'oeuvres on silver trays. Victor kept me close, his hand a constant presence at the small of my back. He introduced me to various people. Politicians, business owners, a judge, never using the word fiancé, but making it clear with his body language and the prominent display of my ring that I was his. I played my part, smiling and nodding, offering brief, polite responses when directly addressed. Most people seemed too intimidated by Victor to engage me in extended conversation, which was a relief. The fewer questions I had to answer, the less chance of saying something that would expose our charade. "You're doing well," Victor murmured as we moved away from a conversation with the mayor. "Very convincing." "I told you I could play a part," I replied, maintaining my smile as a waiter offered champagne. I declined. Victor took a glass, but didn't drink. "He's here," Victor said suddenly, his voice so low I barely heard him. 3 o'clock. Don't look yet. My heart stuttered in my chest. Jack was here, in this room, the man I'd fled from, the father of my child, the source of nightmares that still woke me in a cold sweat. "Breathe, Olivia," Victor instructed, his lips close to my ear. "Look at me." I turned to him, grateful for the direction. Victor's eyes held mine, dark and steady. "You are safe," he said, each word precise and calm. "He cannot hurt you here. Do you understand?" I nodded, trying to slow my breathing. "Good." Victor's hand moved from my back to my face, cupping my cheek in a gesture that appeared tender to anyone watching. "Now laugh, as if I've said something amusing." I forced a laugh, the sound brittle even to my own ears. "Better," Victor approved, his thumb brushing my cheekbone. "Now, we're going to turn and walk toward the bar. He'll see you. He may approach. Are you ready? No, I wasn't ready. I would never be ready, but I nodded anyway. Victor smiled. A rare, genuine smile that transformed his face from merely handsome to devastating. It was part of the act, I knew, but effective nonetheless. He pressed a kiss to my forehead, lingering just long enough to make it convincing, then turned us toward the bar, and there was Jack. He stood with a group of men in expensive suits, a champagne flute in one hand, the other gesturing emphatically as he spoke. He looked the same, handsome in that golden boy way, with his perfectly styled hair and straight teeth, and the confident posture of a man who'd never been told no. The sight of him made my stomach churn. This was the man who had charmed me, then controlled me, then hurt me. The man who had pushed me down the stairs while I was 7 months pregnant, then called an ambulance and tearfully told the paramedics I'd tripped. Jack's gaze swept the room and locked onto me. Recognition flashed across his face, followed by shock as he registered Victor's arm around my waist, the possessive way Victor inclined his head toward mine. He's seen us, I whispered, fighting the urge to run. Good, Victor replied, guiding me not toward the bar but directly toward Jack and his group. Let's say hello. Victor, no, trust me, he murmured, the words a command and a request all at once. Before I could protest further, we were there, standing before the man I'd once believed I loved. Mr. Thornton, Victor said, his voice casual yet somehow carrying an undercurrent of threat. I don't believe we've been formally introduced. Victor Castellano. Jack's face had gone pale beneath his tan. Mr. Castellano, Yes, of course. Your reputation precedes you. Victor's smile didn't reach his eyes. As does yours. Jack's gaze darted to me, then to the ring on my finger, then back to Victor. I see you've met Olivia. More than met, Victor corrected, his arm tightening around my waist. Olivia has made me the happiest man in the city by agreeing to be my wife. The bluntness of the declaration left Jack speechless for a moment. The men around him shifted uncomfortably, sensing the tension but unsure of its source. Congratulations, Jack managed finally, the words strained. Though I must say, it's unexpected. Olivia and I were married until recently. Separated, I corrected, finding my voice at last. For nearly a year. Jack's eyes narrowed. A temporary situation. We have a child together, Olivia, a son who needs his father. Victor's hand moved to my lower back, the touch reassuring. Ryan is doing quite well, actually. He's settled nicely into our home. The color drained from Jack's face. You've moved my son into your house? Without my knowledge or consent? Your son? Victor's voice was dangerously soft. The son you nearly killed when you pushed Olivia down the stairs? That son? Shock rippled through the small group around us. One of the men, an older version of Jack, his father Richard, I realized, stepped forward. Mr. Castellano, perhaps this isn't the place for such personal discussions, he said, his voice placating. Victor ignored him, his gaze fixed on Jack. Let me be perfectly clear, Mr. Thornton. Olivia and Ryan are under my protection now. Any attempts to contact them, to approach them, to so much as speak their names, will be considered a personal insult to me. His smile was all teeth, and I take personal insults very seriously. Jack's face had gone from pale to red, anger overriding his initial fear. You can't just take my family. Your family? I interrupted, anger surging through me. You lost the right to call us that the moment you put your hands on me. Olivia, be reasonable, Richard Thornton interjected. Jack made a mistake, one he's paid for. But keeping a father from his child is a necessary precaution when the father is violent. Victor finished for him. His voice remained pleasant, but his eyes had gone cold. Now, gentlemen, my fiancé and I have other guests to greet. I trust we understand each other. Without waiting for a response, Victor guided me away, his hand firm at my back. I could feel Jack's eyes burning into me as we moved through the crowd. But Victor's presence, solid, imposing, kept me anchored. Breathe, Olivia, Victor reminded me as we reached a quieter corner of the ballroom. You did well. I realized I'd been holding my breath. I exhaled shakily, my hands trembling again. You outed him. In front of his father, his colleagues. I did. Victor signaled a waiter, who who brought a glass of water. He pressed it into my hands. "Drink." I obeyed, the cold water helping to center me. "What happens now?" "Now?" Victor checked his watch. "Now, we stay another 30 minutes. Long enough to be seen, but not so long that you have to endure another encounter. Then we leave. And tomorrow? The next day? Jack won't just give up." "No," Victor agreed, his expression thoughtful. "He won't. But he'll be more careful now, more subtle." Which means we continue as planned. You remain under my protection, in my home. We maintain the engagement fiction until the Thorntons are no longer a threat. I nodded, the weight of my new reality settling over me. For better or worse, my fate was now tied to Victor Castellanos. The devil I knew versus the devil I didn't, except I was beginning to wonder if Victor was truly the devil I'd assumed him to be. 2 weeks passed in a surreal blur of adjustment and pretense. I learned to navigate the mansion without getting lost, to respond naturally when Victor introduced me as his fiancée, to dress and act the part of a crime lord's chosen companion. Ryan thrived under Sophie's care, and I found unexpected comfort in the security of Victor's home, where guards patrolled the perimeter and every entry point was monitored. Jack hadn't attempted direct contact since the gala, but Victor's sources reported he was making inquiries, gathering information. The restraining order I'd filed before fleeing meant little to a man with his resources and connections. Only the shield of Victor's name and reputation kept Jack at bay, a fact that both relieved and troubled me. Victor himself remained an enigma. He was unfailingly polite, solicitous of my comfort and Ryan's well-being, but maintained a careful distance. Some nights he dined with us. Other nights he was absent, attending to business I didn't ask about. When we were in public, restaurants, charity events, the theater, he played the attentive fiancé to perfection. His touches just intimate enough to be convincing without crossing boundaries that would make me uncomfortable. In private, those touches disappeared, and I found myself strangely disappointed. Tonight, I sat in the library, a book open but unread in my lap. Ryan had been asleep for hours, the mansion quiet save for the occasional footsteps of security personnel. Victor had been gone since morning, attending to something he'd described only as a complication. I'd learned not to press for details. The library door opened and Victor entered, loosening his tie as he crossed the threshold. He looked tired, the lines around his eyes more pronounced than usual. "You're still awake," he observed. Moving to the bar cart in the corner, he poured 2 fingers of whiskey into a crystal tumbler. "Trouble sleeping?" I shook my head. "Just reading." I lifted the book as evidence, though I couldn't have said what page I was on. Victor nodded, taking a seat in the leather armchair across from mine. He sipped his whiskey, eyes closing briefly as if savoring the burn. "Long day?" I asked, setting my book aside. A smile flickered across his lips. "You could say that." "Anything I should be concerned about?" Victor studied me over the rim of his glass. "Concerned for me, Olivia? How touching." I flushed, annoyed at being mocked. "Concerned for our arrangement, for Ryan's safety." "Ryan is perfectly safe," Victor assured me, his tone softening. "As are you." We fell into silence, the crackling of the fireplace the only sound between us. After a moment, Victor spoke again. "There's an event tomorrow night, a dinner at the governor's mansion. I'd like you to accompany me." I tensed. "Will the Thorntons be there?" "Possibly. Richard is a significant donor to the governor's campaign." Victor set his glass down. "Is that a problem?" "No," I said quickly. "I just like to be prepared." Victor's gaze was penetrating. "You handled Jack well at the gala. Better than I expected. I've had practice pretending he doesn't terrify me." The words slipped out before I could stop them. More honest than I'd intended. Victor leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "Tell me about him," he said. "Not what he did to you. I know that part. Tell me how you met, how it began." I blinked, surprised by the
Why?
request. "Because I need to understand my enemy," Victor replied simply. "And because you need to talk about it. You've been carrying it alone for too long." His perception unsettled me. I looked away, focusing on the flames in the fireplace. It's a cliché, really. Poor girl meets rich boy. He sweeps her off her feet. Details, Olivia. I sighed. The memories rising like ghosts. I was working at St. Mary's, night shift in the NICU. Jack came in with a friend whose wife had just delivered premature twins. He brought coffee for the entire staff, charmed everyone. When my shift ended, he was waiting, asked me to breakfast. I shrugged. I said yes. And then? Whirlwind romance, expensive gifts, weekend trips. He was attentive, generous, called me multiple times a day to check on me. I laughed bitterly. Later, I realized those calls weren't affection. They were control. Making sure I was where I said I'd be, with who I said I'd be with. Victor nodded, unsurprised. When did it change? When did you first see the real him? 6 months in, after I moved into his condo. I was late coming home from work. A baby had coded and I stayed past my shift. Jack was waiting, furious. He'd thrown my dinner against the wall. I swallowed hard, the memory still vivid. He apologized immediately, cried, said he'd been worried sick, imagining me hurt somewhere, made me promise never to be late without calling. And you believed him. It wasn't a question, but I nodded anyway. I made excuses for him. He was under stress at work. He loved me so much that worry made him crazy. All the usual justifications. When did he first hit you? The bluntness of the question made me flinch. After we were engaged, I went to lunch with a male colleague. Jack saw us. That night, he slapped me. I touched my cheek, the phantom sting still there after all this time. I packed a bag. He blocked the door, begged forgiveness, promised therapy, but didn't go, Victor guessed. Went twice. Claimed the therapist said there was nothing wrong with him. I shook my head. By then I was pregnant, trapped, or so I thought. Victor was silent for a long moment, watching me with those dark, unreadable eyes. The stairs, he said finally. What precipitated that? My throat tightened. This was the hardest part to discuss. The memory I tried hardest to suppress. I found evidence he was embezzling from his family's foundation, confronted him. He denied it, then admitted it, then said I would never tell anyone because who would believe me over him? You threatened to go to his father, Victor said, filling in the blank. I nodded. He laughed at first. Then I showed him the copies I'd made of the evidence. That's when he... My voice faltered. I don't remember much after the first push. Just falling, then waking up in the hospital with broken ribs and terror that I'd lost the baby. Victor's expression had hardened, a muscle jumping in his jaw, and yet, despite all that, despite nearly killing his unborn child, his family still supports him. Money protects its own, I said with a shrug. Richard would never let a scandal touch the Thornton name. Easier to paint me as unstable, a gold digger who got pregnant on purpose to trap his son. Is that what they're saying? That and worse. I managed a weak smile, hence the running, the false names, the cleaning job. Victor stood, moving to kneel beside my chair. The position was so unexpected, so at odds with his usual commanding presence, that I could only stare as he took my hands in his. Listen to me, Olivia, he said, his voice low and intense. Jack Thornton will never touch you again. Never come near you or Ryan, I promise you that. Something in his tone sent a chill down my spine. What are you planning? Nothing you need to concern yourself with. He released my hands, standing again. Just know that you're safe now, permanently. I caught his wrist before he could move away. Victor, no violence, please. His eyebrow rose. You're asking a known criminal to play by the rules? I'm asking the man who has shown me nothing but kindness to not become a murderer on my behalf. A strange expression crossed Victor's face. Surprise, perhaps, or something more complex. There are ways to neutralize threats that don't involve violence, Olivia. Promise me. Victor hesitated, then inclined his head. As you wish. Jack Thornton will remain physically unharmed. Though his pride may not fare as well, relief washed through me. I released his wrist, suddenly aware of how intimate the contact had been. Thank you for telling me your story, Victor said, stepping back. Get some rest. The car will be ready at 7 tomorrow evening. He left the library without another word, leaving me to wonder what exactly I'd set in motion with my confession. The governor's mansion was even more imposing than Victor's home, a sprawling colonial-style structure with white columns and expansive grounds. As our car pulled into the circular driveway, I adjusted the emerald pendant at my throat. Another piece from Victor's seemingly endless supply of jewelry, chosen to match the ring I still wore. "Nervous?" Victor asked, watching me fidget. "A little," I admitted. "I'm still not used to this performance." "You're doing remarkably well." He reached across the seat, straightening the lapel of my midnight blue blazer. The outfit, tailored pants and a matching blazer over a silk camisole, was more understated than the gowns I'd worn to previous events, but no less expensive. "Remember, tonight is about connections. The governor is a reasonable man who values discretion. His wife, less so. Avoid her if possible. Anything else I should know?" Victor's lips quirked. "The salmon will be overcooked. Always is. Choose the beef." The unexpected bit of normalcy, Victor Castellano with opinions about catering, made me laugh. The sound seemed to please him. His eyes warmed slightly. Angelo opened the car door, and Victor exited first, then extended his hand to help me out. As we walked up the steps to the mansion's entrance, his hand settled at the small of my back. A touch I'd come to expect, even anticipate. Inside, the mansion buzzed with the controlled energy of powerful people in close proximity. Governors, judges, business leaders, old money and new, all circulating beneath crystal chandeliers, discussing deals and donations in hushed tones. Victor guided me through the crowd with practiced ease, introducing me to people whose names I immediately forgot. I smiled and nodded, playing my part as the adoring fiancé. For tonight, at least, the Thorntons were nowhere to be seen. "Victor Castellano," a voice boomed from behind us. "About damn time you showed your face at one of these things." We turned to find a barrel-chested man with a shock of white hair and the florid complexion of someone who enjoyed good scotch, perhaps too much. The governor, I realized. "Governor Matthews," Victor greeted him, his tone respectful but not deferential. "Thank you for the invitation." "Wouldn't take no for an answer this time," the governor chuckled, his gaze shifting to me. "And this must be the fiancé everyone's talking about." Victor's arm slipped around my waist. "Olivia Bennett, Governor Matthews." I extended my hand, which the governor took with both of his, holding it perhaps a moment too long. "A pleasure, my dear. You've accomplished the impossible, getting this one to attend social functions." "She can be quite persuasive," Victor replied smoothly. The governor winked at me. "I'll bet." "Listen, Victor, a word in private. That matter we discussed on the phone." Victor hesitated, glancing at me. "Perhaps later, Governor. I don't want to leave Olivia alone just yet." "Nonsense," the governor insisted. "She'll be fine for 5 minutes. My wife will look after her." He signaled to a severe-looking woman across the room, who began making her way toward us. Victor's grip on my waist tightened fractionally. "Very well, 5 minutes." He turned to me, his expression apologetic. "Will you be all right?" "Of course," I assured him, though my stomach knotted at the thought of being separated from him in this crowd of strangers. "Go ahead." Victor leaned in, pressing a kiss to my cheek that lingered just long enough to be convincing. "I won't be far," he murmured against my ear. The words meant only for me. Then he was gone, following the governor toward a set of doors at the far end of the room. The governor's wife arrived moments later, regarding me with the polite disinterest of someone fulfilling an obligation. "Mrs. Matthews," I greeted her, extending my hand. "Ms. Bennett," she replied, barely touching my fingers before withdrawing. "What an unexpected addition you are to our little circle." The emphasis on unexpected made her meaning clear. What was someone like me doing with someone like Victor Castellano? "Victor speaks highly of these gatherings," I lied smoothly. "I've been looking forward to attending." Mrs. Matthews' smile didn't reach her eyes. "I'm sure. The governor tells me you were a nurse before." "Your current situation." "My current situation being engaged to a crime lord, presumably." I maintained my pleasant expression. "Yes, neonatal intensive care." "How noble," she said, in a tone that suggested anything but. "Excuse me a moment. I see someone I must speak with." She departed without waiting for a response, leaving me alone in the center of the room. I took a deep breath, fighting the urge to search for Victor. I could handle 5 minutes on my own. I wasn't that fragile. Olivia. The voice froze the blood in my veins. Jack stood behind me, too close, his cologne, the one I'd once found appealing but now made me nauseous, enveloping me in an unwelcome cloud. "You shouldn't be talking to me," I said without turning, proud of how steady my voice remained. "There's a restraining order, which doesn't apply at public events we both have legitimate reason to attend," Jack countered, moving to stand beside me. He looked the same as at the gala, handsome, polished, the perfect facade hiding the monster beneath. "You look well. Better than when I last saw you. Please leave me alone, Jack," he sighed, as if I were being unreasonable. "I just want to talk about our son. My son. You can't keep him from me forever, Olivia." "Watch me," I said, finally turning to face him directly. Jack's expression hardened. "This engagement to Castellano, it's a sham, isn't it? What did you do? Beg him for protection? Offer him the same services you offered me to secure my ring?" The crude implication made me flinch, but I held my ground. "You know nothing about my relationship with Victor. I know you've moved my son into the home of a known criminal," Jack hissed, dropping the pleasant facade. "Do you have any idea how that looks? What the family court judge will say when I petition for emergency custody?" Fear clawed at my throat, but I forced it down. "Go ahead. Try. Explain to the judge why you violated a restraining order. Why you have 3 domestic violence complaints in your record. Why you pushed your pregnant fiancée down a flight of stairs." Jack's face flushed with anger. "No one will believe you over me. My father has the governor's ear. Half the judges in this city on speed dial. Is there a problem here? Not Victor, as I'd expected, but Angelo, appearing suddenly at my side like a guardian angel in a tailored suit. His expression was pleasant, but his eyes were cold as they assessed Jack. "No problem," Jack said, taking a step back. "Just catching up with my ex." "Ms. Bennett," Angelo said, ignoring Jack completely. "Mr. Castellano asked me to escort you to the East Terrace. He's been detained longer than expected." Relief flooded me. I nodded, turning away from Jack without another word. Angelo guided me through the crowd, his solid presence a barrier between me and the room. "Thank you," I murmured as we reached the doors to the terrace. Angelo inclined his head slightly. "My job, Ms. Bennett." The terrace was empty, the October night too cool for most guests to venture outside. I moved to the stone railing, breathing in the crisp air, trying to calm my racing heart. The encounter with Jack had shaken me more than I wanted to admit. "You handled that well." I turned to find Victor approaching, his expression dark. "You saw?" "Angelo texted me the moment Thornton approached you." Victor came to stand beside me at the railing, close enough that our shoulders nearly touched. I would have intervened myself, but the governor was being particularly thorough in his requests. "It's fine. I'm fine." I wrapped my arms around myself, suddenly cold. Jack mentioned petitioning for emergency custody of Ryan. Victor snorted. "Let him try. My lawyers are already building a case that would bury him. The restraining order, the hospital records from your fall, testimony from nurses who treated your previous injuries, all of it admissible in family court." I stared at him, caught off guard. "You've been preparing for this? Of course." Victor removed his suit jacket and draped it over my shoulders. The fabric was warm from his body, his scent enveloping me. "I told you, Olivia. You and Ryan are under my protection now. That means anticipating threats, not just reacting to them. Why?" The question that had been haunting me for weeks finally escaped. "Why are you doing all this? The truth, Victor. Not that line about the Thorntons being problematic for your business." Victor was silent for a long moment, his gaze fixed on the manicured gardens below. When he finally spoke, his voice was quieter than usual. "When I was 8 years old, my father killed my mother." The statement was so unexpected, so matter-of-fact, that for a moment I couldn't process it. "Victor, He held up a hand, stopping my response. She had tried to leave him many times. Each time he found her, brought her back, punished her. The last time, the punishment was fatal. His jaw tightened. I witnessed it, did nothing, could do nothing. I was a child. Horror washed through me. "I'm so sorry." Don't be. It was a long time ago. Victor turned to face me, his expression carefully controlled. But I made a promise that day, that I would never be like him, that I would never harm those weaker than myself, that I would protect those who couldn't protect themselves. Even if you had to break other laws to do it, I said softly, understanding dawning. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Even then, the world isn't black and white, Olivia. Sometimes good people do bad things for the right reasons. Sometimes bad people do good things for selfish ones. I've made peace with the ambiguity of my choices. I studied him in the dim light of the terrace, seeing him, truly seeing him, for perhaps the first time. Not just the dangerous crime boss, not just the calculating protector, but a man shaped by trauma and determined to forge his own path through a complicated world. Thank you, I said finally, for telling me, for helping us. Victor reached out, tucking a strand of hair behind my ear. The gesture was so gentle, so at odds with the violence his hands were capable of, that it made my breath catch. We should return inside, he said, dropping his hand. Before your absence generates more gossip than it already has. I nodded, but neither of us moved. We stood there, facing each other in the cool night air, something unspoken passing between us. Not part of our charade, not for the benefit of watching eyes, but something real and unexpected. Victor's phone buzzed, breaking the moment. He checked it, his expression darkening. We need to leave. Now. What's wrong? Alarm surged through me at the sudden change. Angelo just received word that someone attempted to breach the security at the mansion. Victor was already guiding me toward the doors, his hand firm at my back. Ryan is safe. They never got close. But I want to return immediately. Fear clenched my heart. Jack? Unknown at this point, Victor said grimly. But we'll find out. And they will regret it. The mansion's security room was like something from a spy film, wall-to-wall monitors displaying feeds from dozens of cameras positioned around the estate. Victor stood at the center, radiating cold fury as Angelo replayed the security footage. On the largest screen, a shadowy figure scaled the garden wall, only to freeze as floodlights activated. The intruder bolted, escaping before security could apprehend them. The timing suggests prior knowledge of our attendance at the governor's event, Victor said, his voice dangerously calm. The breach occurred precisely when we would be away. Angelo nodded grimly. Attempted entry was near the east wing. Ms. Bennett's quarters. My quarters, where Ryan slept. Cold dread washed through me. How did they know where my rooms were located? Victor's expression darkened further. An excellent question. He turned to Angelo. Review staff movements for the past 2 weeks. Phone records, visitors, unusual behavior. Someone gave information to our intruder, already in progress, Angelo confirmed. And Ms. Bennett and Ryan, move them to my wing, tonight. The declaration caught me off guard. Your wing, but it has enhanced security, Victor cut me off, his tone brooking no argument. Separate entrance codes, additional guards. It's the safest place in the mansion. I wanted to protest, but couldn't argue with his logic. Ryan's safety came first. All right. Victor's gaze softened slightly. It's temporary, Olivia, until we identify who's behind this. But we both knew who was behind it. Jack might not have scaled the wall himself, but his fingerprints were all over this attempt. Within hours, my belongings and Ryan's nursery had been relocated to a suite adjoining Victor's private quarters. The rooms were even more luxurious than my previous accommodations. All dark woods and rich fabrics, masculine but not oppressively so. A connecting door led directly to Victor's rooms, though it remained firmly closed. Ryan slept through the move, blissfully unaware of the danger that had crept close to our sanctuary. I envied his peaceful ignorance as I paced the new rooms, too wired to sleep despite the lateness of the hour. A soft knock at the main door startled me. I opened it to find Victor, still in his shirt and trousers from earlier, though he'd discarded the tie and unfastened the top buttons of his shirt. May I come in? He asked. Uncharacteristically deferential. I stepped aside, allowing him to enter. He moved to the center of the room, hands clasped behind his back. A posture I'd come to recognize as his thinking stance. We've identified the security breach, he he said without preamble. One of the kitchen staff was approached 3 days ago. Offered $10,000 for information about your routines, your location in the house. My stomach dropped. Who approached them? Not Jack directly, someone working for him. Victor's jaw tightened. The staff member has been dealt with. I didn't ask what that meant. Some questions were better left unasked. What now? I wrapped my arms around myself, suddenly chilled despite the room's warmth. Now we end this. Victor's voice was quiet, but held an edge of finality. I've been patient, Olivia. Respected your wish that Jack remain physically unharmed, but he's escalated the situation by targeting my home, endangering my... He paused, seeming to search for the right word. My family. The word hung between us, heavy with implications. Were Ryan and I truly Victor's family now? Or just possessions he was protecting? What are you planning? I asked, tension coiling in my chest. Nothing illegal, as per your request. Victor moved to the window, gazing out at the night. But I'm done playing defense. Tomorrow, we take the fight to him. How? Victor turned back to me, his expression resolute. Do you still have evidence of his embezzlement? The copies you mentioned? I nodded slowly. In a safety deposit box, in another city, under another name. I kept it as insurance. I need it. Victor, I don't want to be responsible for... You won't be, he interrupted. This is my decision, my responsibility, but I need that evidence. I hesitated, torn between fear of what Victor might do and trust in his promise not to physically harm Jack. Finally, I nodded. I'll call the bank tomorrow. Good. Victor approached me, close enough that I could smell his cologne, see the faint stubble darkening his jaw. One more thing. What? We need to make our engagement more visible, public, undeniable. I frowned. It's already all over the society pages. What more do you want? A formal engagement party, here, at the mansion. Invite the city's elite, the press, everyone who matters. The suggestion startled me. You hate public events. A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. I do. But sometimes exceptions must be made. And this helps us how? It establishes legitimacy, Victor explained. Makes it harder for Jack to paint you as someone who's using me for protection. Makes our relationship seem more real. It isn't real, I reminded him, the words coming out harsher than intended. Something flickered in Victor's eyes. Hurt? No, impossible. Victor Castellano didn't get hurt by words. Reality is perception, Olivia, he said finally, and we need the perception to be flawless. He was right, of course. The more convincing our charade, the safer Ryan and I would be, but the line between pretense and reality was blurring more each day, and I wasn't sure where that left me emotionally. When? I asked, conceding the point. Saturday, 3 days from now. Victor reached out, brushing his knuckles lightly across my cheek, a touch so unexpected it made me shiver. Get some rest. Angela will accompany you to the bank tomorrow. He left before I could respond, the door closing softly behind him. I stood frozen in place, my cheek still tingling from his touch, wondering when exactly the game we were playing had become something more. The next 3 days passed in a whirlwind of preparation. Victor spared no expense for the engagement party. Florists transformed the mansion's ballroom into a lush garden. Caterers prepared a menu that would make 5-star restaurants envious, and a small army of staff polished every surface until the entire house gleamed. Through it all, Victor was conspicuously absent. He left early each morning and returned late, offering only vague explanations about arrangements and tying up loose ends. The safety deposit box contents, files detailing Jack's systematic theft from his family's charitable foundation, had been handed over to Angela without comment. Part of me feared what Victor planned to do with that information. The other part, the part that still woke in cold sweats from nightmares of Jack's hands around my throat, didn't care. Saturday evening arrived, and with it a stylist to prepare me for the party. The gown Victor had selected was breathtaking, a deep emerald that matched my ring, with a fitted bodice that flowed into a skirt of liquid silk. My hair was arranged in an elegant updo, my makeup subtle but enhancing. The woman in the mirror looked like she belonged in Victor Castellano's world, polished, confident, beautiful. a far cry from the frightened nurse who had applied for a maid position 3 months earlier. "You look stunning," Sophie said from the doorway. Ryan balanced on her hip. My son wore a tiny tuxedo, his blonde hair combed neatly to one side. "Doesn't Mommy look pretty, Ryan?" Ryan babbled happily, reaching for me with chubby hands. I took him from Sophie, careful not to wrinkle my dress. "Thank you for getting him ready." "My pleasure." Sophie smiled. "Mr. Castellano asked me to bring him down for a few photos before the guests arrive. If that's all right with you?" Photos. Another piece of evidence for our fabricated love story. I nodded. "Of course." Downstairs, Victor waited in the grand foyer, striking in a black tuxedo that fit him perfectly. He turned as we descended the stairs, his expression changing when he saw us, softening in a way I'd rarely witnessed. "There they are," he said, stepping forward to meet us at the bottom of the staircase. His eyes traveled from my face to my dress and back again. "You look exquisite, Olivia." "Thank you," I said, oddly breathless under his gaze. "You clean up well yourself." Victor's lips curved in a smile. He reached for Ryan, who went to him willingly. My son had taken to Victor with surprising ease, fascinated by the deep voice and strong hands that handled him with unexpected gentleness. "The photographer is waiting in the library," Victor said, adjusting Ryan on his arm with practiced ease. "Just a few pictures for the society pages." The next half hour was surreal. Victor and I posing with Ryan, looking for all the world like a real family. Victor's arm around my waist, my head tilted toward his shoulder, Ryan giggling between us. The photographer coaxed genuine smiles from us, capturing moments that, in another life, might have been treasured family memories instead of carefully constructed evidence. "Perfect," the photographer declared finally. "These will be beautiful, Mr. Castellano." Victor nodded in dismissal, and the man packed up his equipment. Sophie stepped forward to take Ryan back upstairs. He would make a brief appearance at the beginning of the party, then return to the nursery for the evening. As Sophie departed with my son, Victor turned to me, producing a velvet box from his pocket. One last touch. Inside was a necklace, emerald surrounded by diamonds, matching the ring on my finger. Without asking, Victor moved behind me, fastening it around my neck. His fingers brushed my skin, lingering a moment longer than necessary. "There," he said softly. "Now you're perfect." Our eyes met in the mirror before us, and something passed between us, an acknowledgement of the strange intimacy we'd developed, playing these roles that were beginning to feel less like roles and more like something else, something neither of us had anticipated. The moment was broken by Angelo's arrival, announcing that the first guests had arrived. The ballroom filled quickly, politicians, business leaders, celebrities, all curious to see the woman who had captured Victor Castellano's heart. I played my part flawlessly, my hand in Victor's, smiling and greeting guests as if I'd been born to this life of privilege and power. Victor remained close, his arm around my waist, occasionally pressing kisses to my temple or whispering in my ear. Little gestures that appeared loving to observers, but were often just practical communications. "The man approaching is the district attorney. Be polite but vague." Or, "The woman in red is a gossip columnist. Say nothing substantive." Halfway through the evening, as we circulated among the guests, Victor suddenly stiffened beside me. I followed his gaze to the entrance, where Richard Thornton stood with his wife. Jack was noticeably absent. "I didn't invite them," Victor murmured, his grip on my waist tightening. "Then why are they here?" I whispered back, anxiety coiling in my stomach. "Let's find out." Victor guided me toward the Thorntons, his expression pleasant but eyes cold. "Mr. and Mrs. Thornton, what a surprise." Richard Thornton was a distinguished-looking man in his 60s, with Jack's coloring but sharper features. His wife, a brittle blonde whose face showed evidence of multiple cosmetic procedures, eyed me with barely disguised contempt. "Victor," Richard greeted him with forced cordiality. "We received word of your engagement celebration and felt we should pay our respects, given the complicated situation." "How thoughtful," Victor replied, each syllable dripping with insincerity. "Though I don't recall sending you an invitation." Richard's smile never wavered. "The governor mentioned it. We're old friends, as you know." "Of course." Victor's thumb traced small circles on my lower back. a subtle gesture of reassurance. Well, you're here now. Enjoy the champagne. It's excellent. He made to steer me away, but Richard stepped into our path. Actually, I was hoping for a private word. A matter of some importance. Victor raised an eyebrow. Whatever you have to say can be said in front of my fiancé. It concerns my son, Richard said, his gaze flicking to me briefly, and certain accusations being circulated. Ah. So Victor had already begun using the embezzlement evidence. I maintained my neutral expression, though my heart raced. Perhaps my office would be more appropriate, Victor conceded after a moment. He turned to me. Olivia, would you mind? Not at all, I said, forcing a smile. I'll circulate. Victor pressed a kiss to my cheek, whispering in my ear, Angelo will stay with you. This won't take long. As the men departed, Mrs. Thornton regarded me with thinly veiled hostility. You've certainly landed on your feet, haven't you? From nurse to criminal's whore in a few short months. The crudeness of the attack startled me. Mrs. Thornton, don't, she cut me off. Don't pretend this is anything but what it is, you latching onto the most dangerous man you could find to spite my son. I took a deep breath, reminding myself that causing a scene would only damage the image Victor and I had worked to create. I understand you're upset, but... You've ruined my son's life, she hissed, leaning closer. First with those ridiculous abuse allegations, then by taking his child, and now this... spectacle. She gestured at the party around us. What did Castellano offer you that Jack couldn't? More money? Power? Or just the thrill of sleeping with a killer? Angelo materialized at my side, his presence a silent warning. Mrs. Thornton straightened, plastering a false smile on her face as another guest approached. Perhaps some air would do you good, Ms. Bennet, Angelo suggested quietly. I nodded, grateful for the escape. He guided me toward the terrace doors, away from Mrs. Thornton's venomous stare. Outside, the cool night air helped clear my head. The garden below was illuminated by strategic lighting, creating an ethereal glow among the carefully manicured paths. Are you all right, Ms. Bennet? Angelo asked, keeping a respectful distance. Yes, thank you. I took another deep breath. Does it ever get easier? Being hated by strangers for reasons that have nothing to do with who you actually are? Angelo's lips quirked in a rare, almost smile. In Mr. Castellano's world? No, but you learned to wear it like armor. Before I could respond, the terrace doors opened again. Victor emerged, his expression unreadable. Angelo, give us a moment, he said. Angelo nodded and moved to stand by the doors, close enough to intervene if needed, but far enough to give us privacy. Victor joined me at the railing. Richard Thornton has agreed to remove his family's opposition to your custody of Ryan. I stared at him in disbelief. Just like that? Why would he? Because the alternative is a federal investigation into the family foundation, Victor interrupted. The evidence you preserved was quite comprehensive, Olivia, enough to send Jack to prison for a very long time. You blackmailed them. Victor shrugged. I presented options. Richard made his choice. He turned to face me fully. Jack will be leaving the country tomorrow. An extended posting at the family's London office. He's surrendering all parental rights to Ryan as part of the arrangement. The news was so unexpected, so monumental, that for a moment I couldn't speak. Freedom. Real freedom. Not just temporary protection, but a permanent solution. Jack gone. His legal claims to Ryan severed. Why? I finally managed. Why would Richard agree to this? Jack is his son, and the foundation is his legacy, Victor replied. Richard built it over 40 years. It funds hospitals, research, scholarships, all bearing the Thornton name. A scandal would destroy not just the foundation, but the family's reputation for generations. So he sacrificed Jack to save the family name, in a manner of speaking, though sacrifice implies Jack is innocent. Victor's voice hardened. He isn't. He stole from sick children and battered women to fund his lifestyle. Richard knows that now. Has proof he can't ignore. Tears welled in my eyes. Relief, gratitude, and a dozen other emotions I couldn't name all colliding at once. Thank you, I whispered. I can't ever repay this. Victor reached out, brushing a tear from my cheek with his thumb. You don't need to. We stood in silence for a moment, the sounds of the party a distant backdrop to the significance of what had just happened. What happens now? I asked finally. With us, I mean. This arrangement. The engagement. Something shifted in Victor's expression. A vulnerability I'd never seen before. That depends. On what? On whether it's still just an arrangement to you. The question hung between us, charged with possibility. My heart pounded as I searched his face for meaning. What are you saying, Victor? He stepped closer. Close enough that I could feel the warmth of him in the cool night air. I'm saying that what began as pretense has become something else. For me, at least. Something else. I echoed, afraid to name it directly. Yes. Victor's hand came up to cup my face, gentle but certain. The question is, has it become something else for you too? Had it? The line between performance and reality had blurred so gradually that I hadn't noticed when my feelings had transformed, when fear had given way to respect, when gratitude had evolved into affection, when the touch of his hand had begun to elicit not just security but desire. It has, I admitted, the truth of it surprising even me. But I'm afraid. Of me? Victor's brow furrowed. Of us. I placed my hand over his where it rested on my cheek. Of what happens when the novelty wears off. When I'm no longer the damsel you saved, but just me. Olivia. With all my baggage and fears and trust issues. Victor's eyes held mine, steady and certain. I know exactly who you are, Olivia. I've seen your strength, your determination, your capacity to love. Those aren't qualities that fade with novelty. And Ryan? He's part of this too. A genuine smile spread across Victor's face. Ryan is the easiest part of the equation. I love that boy. Would protect him with my life, whether you and I... He hesitated. Whether there's an us or not. The sincerity in his voice was unmistakable. This wasn't the practiced charm Jack had used to ensnare me. This was raw, honest vulnerability from a man who rarely showed such emotion. I want to try, I said softly. For real this time. Not for show, not for protection. Just us. Seeing what we could be together. Relief and joy transformed Victor's expression. He leaned forward, his forehead touching mine. That's all I'm asking for, a chance. His lips found mine, gentle at first, then deepening as I responded. This wasn't our first kiss. There had been others, brief touches for the benefit of observers, but it was the first real one. The first that wasn't for show, wasn't calculated to maintain our fiction. When we finally broke apart, Victor smiled. Not the controlled curve of lips he showed the world, but something genuine and warm. We should return to our guests. Do we have to? I asked, only half joking. The idea of facing the crowd again after this intimate moment felt jarring. Victor laughed, the sound startling in its normality. Unfortunately, yes. Just a little longer. Then they'll leave, and we can begin the real celebration. Which is? The start of our actual engagement. His eyes gleamed with mischief. Unless you'd like to give back the ring? I glanced down at the emerald on my finger, now a symbol of something true rather than fabricated. I think I'll keep it. It's growing on me. Victor kissed me again, quickly this time. As you wish. As we returned to the ballroom, Victor's arm around my waist felt different. Not possessive for show, but genuinely protective, genuinely affectionate. The guests, the music, the champagne, all of it seemed brighter, more vibrant now that the shadow of Jack had been lifted, and the pretense between Victor and me had transformed into something authentic. Mrs. Thornton watched us from across the room, her expression sour as she noted our clasped hands, the genuine smile on my face. For once, I didn't care about her judgment, or anyone else's. Let them think what they wanted. The truth was better than any fiction we could have created. Later that night, after the last guest had departed and Ryan slept peacefully in his nursery, Victor and I stood in the moonlight of his private balcony, his arms wrapped around me from behind as we gazed at the city lights in the distance. No regrets? He asked softly, his breath warm against my ear. I turned in his arms, meeting his gaze. Not one. You saved us, Victor. Not just from Jack, but from a life of running, of looking over my shoulder. You saved yourself, he countered. I just provided resources. And protection. And a home. I reached up, tracing the line of his jaw. And somewhere along the way, love. The word hung between us, new and fragile but undeniable. Victor's eyes darkened with emotion. Love, he repeated, as if testing how the word felt in his mouth. Yes, I suppose that's what this is. You suppose? I teased, raising an eyebrow. Victor laughed, pulling me closer. I know. I've known since that first night at the governor's gala, when you faced Jack without flinching. When I realized I would tear the world apart to keep you safe. That's a bit dramatic, I murmured, though his words sent warmth spreading through my chest. I'm an Italian from a crime family, Victor replied with mock solemnity. Drama is in my blood. We laughed together, the sound carrying into the night, a promise of lighter days ahead, of healing, of building something neither of us had dared hope for when our paths first crossed. Later, as we lay together in the quiet darkness of Victor's room, now our room, I thought about the strange path that had led me here. From terror to safety, from pretense to truth, from isolation to family. Victor's arm tightened around me, as if sensing my thoughts. Sleep, Olivia, he murmured, his voice heavy with contentment. Tomorrow is the first day of our real life together. And as I drifted toward sleep, I realized he was right. The charade was over. The fear was gone. What remained was something neither of us had planned, but both of us had found. Love, in the most unexpected place. No longer his maid, no longer his pretend fiancé, but truly his partner. And he, no longer my protector by arrangement, but by choice, by love. The whole city had known I wasn't just his maid. Now they would know I was so much more. His equal, his love, his family. And this time, it wouldn't be a performance for safety's sake. It would be real. It already was.